Okay. So yesterday we covered most of chapter 8, and what we said was sort of a new turn, a new direction, that the pratim are higher than the klal. And essentially, not only are we holding by the giant chiddush that we said in the previous class before that, which is that when you, by working with the to get to the klal, you actually can access the infinite light which is hidden inside the klal. It's hard to recap. I mean, you guys were there, so you remember. But basically, we said that since the original klal of the Aliyas Haratzon was taken from the Or Ein Sof to begin with, which was the whole reason why that had to be. Therefore, when you wind up ultimately getting back to that original klal and doing the avodah to reach the klal, you unlock the Or Ein Sof, the infinite ocean of light that's available in the klal. But then we said you can even go a step higher. You can go actually to what's called the Etzem Ha'or, which is beyond even the infinite ocean of light from which the original klal was taken, which is completely beyond not only the worlds, but even the source from which the worlds were taken from. And it's inside of the essence before the Or Ein Sof is in a state of hispashtus. But in order to do that, you have to work with the pratim, right? And so that's what we said, by getting into the details of the pratim, because the source of the prat is actually higher than the source of the klal, therefore only through the pratim can you actually reach the essence of the light, which is basically reaching the essence of God. And this ultimately explains to us why Hashem went through all this, because only when you delineate the world into 10 statements and into its final form, and then work on yourself in the bittul, can you actually unleash and reveal the true dira b'tachtonim, what's the dira? The full Hashem himself, the Etzem Ha'or. Now, we said a few words about how we understand that the prat is higher than the klal. And we said we could see this in the fact that Bina has a higher source than Chokhmah, and speech, Dibur, has a higher source than Bina even. And we basically said, we wrapped it up all in a line that the sages said, Mitalmidai Yoser Mikulam. I learned a lot from my teachers, even more from my friends, but from my students I learned the most. In other words, the more you break it down, the more you delineate it, when you say something in speech, suddenly you come up with chidushim that you didn't even bring to the lesson plan. Right? So somehow when you break it down into the bottom level, you wind up accessing the highest of all places. That's what we said yesterday. Moving on. Okay, so Vahanim Shal, page Shin Lamed Beis, right above chapter 9. Vahanim Shal Mizeh Yuvan Lamaila B'Inyan Asara Maimarus. So what is the Nimsham is the analog. What we're actually discussing above is the concept of the 10 statements of creation. Even though the 10 statements are merely details of the original one statement of Bereshis, nonetheless, not only from this itself, not only is this not a descent, right? But from this itself, because we just established yesterday and in the introduction that the root of the pratim are higher than the klal, right? And again, we also said this just almost in a logical sense, without going on to the whole concept of Bina and Chochmah and Dibur, where does the klal is basically wrapping up a bunch of stuff. That's what a klal is. It amalgamates, right, everything inside of one point. So obviously it's taking pratim that were previously existing and putting them into a point. So it's almost like an obvious thing that the prat is higher than the klal. Where's the klal getting all of its potential pratim from something that preceded it? In any case, from the fact that the prat is higher than the klal, therefore doing the avoda in the world which is specifically in a state of the final pratim, and particularly because when you get to the pratim in their most extreme form, which is us, you also wind up with a situation where you wind up with free choice. Because we said, why does Hashem create the world in 10 statements and not in one statement? Because this ultimately gave this experience of duality. And that gave the ability for free choice. And that also gives you the ability to choose the wrong thing, which means you go into a state of like extreme darkness and a distance from the sort of the safety and godliness of the klal by plunging down into this place of the pratim. And therefore, by doing all the avoda in this area, so the idea is, what is our ability to be able to choose wrong, right? In the analogy that we were talked about before, about how I learn more from my students, right? So we said there was a few stages of that. First of all, even if I'm by myself, when I speak, right, and even if just literally I'm speaking to myself and I'm speaking out loud, I can sometimes come up with more chidushim than I had when I thought. But when I speak to a student, there's an extra added benefit of saying it out loud, which is what? He can come and say, I don't understand. In other words, what you are saying, I'm seeing it in the totally opposite way, and I think this, right? Which is like, maybe it could be like, are you teaching me avodah zara? Like everything you're saying, mamash, seems totally wrong to me. So this is like Hashem basically speaking out the world to the creation and leaving us with free choice, where we could say, maybe there's not a God in this world. In other words, like the fact that he brought us to such a low place in the details, to the point that we have free choice, this is likened to the student who is hearing the proposed lesson plan from the teacher, but not getting it, and on the contrary, coming up with total contradictions to what the Rav even said. So this is essentially the analogy for that is us, or the analog for that analogy is us having free choice and potentially thinking that it's totally reasonable to choose something other than God in our daily lives, which could happen, right? So in that state of the details of the pratim in their most extreme form, where even the student is even challenging the idea, which then would require what? The teacher to come with like an overwhelming state of genius, so we could come and clarify your questions. And again, that's the whole idea, that when you get to the prat, it triggers a much, much greater, higher level of godliness. In order to solve those, I have to make mamash split the sea, so you know that there's a God, right? I have to reveal things that that are much, much higher forms of divinity because of your questions, and the student is perplexed. And therefore, magim l'mayla yosem b'chinas haklal de'olam d'maimer echad. Therefore, we reach through these details higher than the original klal of that, the point of the aliyas ratzon, and yiser mizo. What's even more, magim gam le'etzem ha'or. We even reach to the essence of the light. Shelamayla gam me'or. Which, again, review for us, because we understood this already, but reaching to the etzem of the light means you reach to the light as it still is inside the atzmos before it even projects itself, from which that ocean of light, the aliyas haratzon, will be taken. And through working with the details, you can reach all the way back there. Yeah, Ruby. The etzem itself. The thing is, that's true, but the etzem itself, it's almost like not as impressive as the etzem ha'or, for the reason that we said before. The etzem itself, usually when it comes to or, is in a state of contradiction. In other words, atzmus is defined by that which cannot be revealed, right? It's like the essential unknowable thing. And therefore, the light which comes out, even though it's an attempt to express Hashem's essence, and it's infinite light, which is beyond the worlds, it's still basically merely a ray of the essence. And therefore, it doesn't actually capture the essence. As much as Hashem wants to reveal himself with his galus of the Orient Sof, right? We spoke about it yesterday. He doesn't ultimately. And just from knowing the light, you still actually kind of know nothing about the Atzmus, because it can't reveal itself, otherwise it wouldn't be Atzmus. So to go up inside the Etzem HaOr is essentially this unique type of or, which only the Atzmus knows about. It doesn't come out, right? I mean, unless we trigger it with some kind of asking questions to the Rav and having him be so in need of a desperation to answer us that he reveals that even. But it's essentially bringing to light the Atzmus. So it's actually higher in a certain sense than the Atzmus alone, because the Atzmus alone has a limitation that it can't be brought to light. So the Etzem HaOr is like the unlimited state of the Atzmus Mamish, that even that which cannot be brought to light has light involved with it. It's not a light which comes out of the Atzmus, which then sort of dims down the Atzmus. It itself is Atzmus. It's just the abilities of Atzmus to reveal itself kipshuto Mamish.
only the Indian of Gilui, even though it doesn't necessarily come out of that, we reach that.
Again, but if whatever Atzmus has, you're saying it has the Indian of Helam, so we would want to bring that to a state of Gilui as well. That's what the Etzem Or does. You know, usually what happens like this, right? The part of the Atzmus which is called, Shaykh to Gilui is revealed by the light. And the part of the Atzmus is Shaykh to, which is not Shaykh to being revealed, is revealed by the Kalim. Right? And when the Kalim come out and you say, well, they don't reveal anything, on the contrary, they just look like something other than God, say, B'diuk, that's a revelation of the Atzmus's ability to hide itself. Right? But what we're saying is, therefore, there's some part of the Atzmus which cannot really show itself in a way that it looks like it's God. It can only show its koach of gevul by basically not looking like God, staying in a state of ketzimus. I think. I mean, you're making me. You're putting us through this very process right now. But I think that the Indian of the Etzem Or is the resolution to that. It's not just the koach of gilui inside the atzmus in its highest form. It's literally megal the atzmus, which means all the koachos of the atzmus. The koach of the bli gevul and the koach of gevul, because it's not or. It's the etzem of the or, right? Which means it's not different than the etzem itself. Needs to be tzrich iyu. No, I hear what you're saying. Yeah.
Wouldn't the atzmut basically be the prat?
Yeah, in a certain sense, that's what he's sort of saying. Like
Right.
not that it's the prat. Yeah,
we
well, that,
don't understand.
yeah.
So you have to go. And at that point.
Well, hold on a second. The prat, right? This is actually lining right up. What would the prat really be? It's like the kli. In a certain sense, you could say the klal is like the light, and the prat is the kli. And so, why is it that dafka working with the pratim do you reach this highest place of the etzem or? Because it's the part which doesn't look like God. And the part that doesn't look like God, it separates itself. It makes it look like you have free choice, that there's not a God. That contains the greatest secret of the essence of Hashem himself, the part of Hashem that can never be known. It doesn't look like God, right? It's the kiperach. But I guess what I'm saying is, when you work with the pratim, which basically means working with the kalim, and you're unleashing the light that's inside the kalim, what do you get to? He says the etzem or, which means that's the part of the atzmus which is usually not able to be revealed, which is usually the part of the atzmus which, when it does reveal itself, it shows you kalim. Here, you're seeing that the kalim are or, right? The kalim are themselves godly. Think about that. I agree with you there, but it's at this level where we say that the essence of the soul is it doesn't have kochos, because God forbid you say it had kochos, it would be in a state of plurality. But it's no se asa kochos. It carries those kochos, right? And on the contrary, the fact that it's kind of like the letters of the Torah inside of God. It's like it has all these 600,000 letters, right? But God forbid to say that there's actually a breakdown of 600,000 letters, because that would put God into a plurality. But nonetheless, he has carrying those letters, right? And on the contrary, the fact that he's carrying those letters inside of him in a state of non-existence, that's a higher level of divinity, the prat inside of Hashem, than the overwhelming infinite light that would shine out from those letters when it actually comes out, because the state of those letters is a state of zero. It's like we talk about the osios hachakika inside the luchos, where the letter doesn't take up any shape. So it's a form with a state of zero-ness of like plumpness, whatever you want to call it, of form, right? Of materialism to the extreme, and therefore it can be in the atzmos. So when you say it's like kochos and not the etzem, but the kochos themselves are carried inside the etzem. And not only that, but when they're at that state, when they're inside the etzem, they're called the koach of gevul of the etzem, which is a higher koach than the koach of the bli gevul in the etzem, right? So we don't want to knock the kochos too much. They're ultimately the secret to a secret way in. Now you're going to just bring up terms and confuse me. But Giloi Helam is another thing. But like I said, it's these galus of the Atzmus Mamish, right? Okay, moving right along. Although I do feel that was actually a very productive aside. So thank you for clarifying that for us. But Yisera Mizeh, we're basically done with the mimers. Right? If anyone else wants to just drag this out, by all means, let's do it. I didn't realize how close we were to the end. We're basically at the end. This is the last paragraph. Okay. We're going to have to play some cards or something afterwards, fill our time. Chas v'sham. Yisera mizo, the idea iyun v'yagia ba'pratim, the Torah Shebal Peh. And one last point. If you notice, every paragraph was like a crazy giant chiddush compared to the one before it. Just kept going higher and higher. So now he finishes up with a bang. He says, more than this, idea iyun v'yagia ba'pratim, the Torah Shebal Peh. By taking a look into the details of the Torah Shebal Peh, which is already the prat of the prat of the prat of the prat, right? Because we said that the Aleph was the klal, and then maybe the Anochi was the klal, and then the first pasuk was the klal, and then the whole Chumash was the klal. One thing we could be sure was the Torah Shebal Peh was the prat. And even though in the Torah Shebal Peh we also had Mishnah and then Gemara, etc., that also went to klal and prat, but the definition of prat was the Torah Shebal Peh. So we said all the way down when you start to go into the details of the Torah Shebal Peh, which is basically Chassidus, right? At the end of the era of Torah Shebal Peh, they sort of found this gem in there. Megim l'mayla gam b'chinas haklal. Also here we reach the higher level in the klal. It sounds like similar to what he's saying in the last paragraph, but before he was talking about the worlds, and now he's talking about the Torah. Because if you recall in the beginning of this mimer, we had two questions. Why did he create klal and prat when it came to the Torah? Why did he give the Torah in such a manner? And also why did he create the world in such a manner? So we just got through saying that he created the world in such a manner because through working with the details of the world, the final kelim, the pachim katanim, you can actually reach to the etzem ha'or. And now he's saying inside of the Torah itself. And that's kind of a more broad situation. But we actually have our hands on the Torah. This is how we do the avoda in the world, by learning the Torah. Through this of dissecting the details, you reach to a level higher than the klal. It's kind of tying in nicely with our afternoon class. It says anything that a future student a bright student will come up with, l'chadesh dafka, which means he's being machadesh, which means he's finding something on his own, which is the symbol of your correct, procedure of dealing with the prat. You're not going to find something on your own if you're just dealing with that which was given to you. That's called the klal. You have to break it down. Oh, you found details that no one ever saw before. That's called a chiddush in Torah. So by accomplishing this, checking out this footnote, see if we need anything there. Al yidei yagiyah b'Torah mamshichim b'chinas haTorah kamoshim mushreshes b'helem ha'atzmi de'ein sof. Wow. So essentially, what you're doing in that moment is you're reaching the state of the Torah as it is rooted in what we call the Helem Ha'atzmi De'ein Sof. That same level that we just spoke about where creation came from, like the essence of God, is also where the Torah comes from. I actually mentioned it in passing regarding like the 600,000 letters that are like inside of the Atzmus in a state of non-being. The empty letters, so to speak, of the Luchos was the presentation of that. So only by going into the Pratim, only by making Chidushim, right? Only by sort of being that student that makes the teacher wiser, can you actually reach to the Atzmus of the Torah, where it's hidden in a state which is before it came out of Hashem's mouth as the Aleph of Anochi, even, right? It's essentially in the Helema Atzmi. It's called the essential concealment of God. It's above the Torah as it was presented to us, as it came in a state of revelation. Let's just quickly do these footnotes. I don't see why not. We got some time in our hands. Let's do footnote 45, 46 real quick. So he says, seemingly, even though it looks like all the matters of Torah Shebal Peh, the oral Torah, shechidshu chazal, that the chazal came up with, hakol mitorah shebekasav, right? Aren't they really just saying, Manahana mili, right? Like, where do these words come from? And they point to a certain verse in the written Torah. So on the outset, it looks like all the chidushim of the Torah Shebal Peh are specifically taken from the klal of the Torah Shebekasav, right? Hine be'emes kol inyan Torah Shebal Peh hen bechinis chidush bekoach atzmam b'yigiyasam dafka. Wow. The reality is, he's basically explaining here how the Torah Shebaal Peh is Pashut higher than the Torah Shebeksav for the reasons that we said. Because why? They didn't just basically fall out of the Torah Shebeksav on a silver platter and say, look at all these details, that were hidden in there. They came with great toil to try and figure out through the Torah principles how to mine them out. And therefore it came with the Yegiya and the toil of the Pratim, right? And therefore, he says they really were a chiddush of the sages of the past with their own koach. And because they worked with the pratim of the Torah, Torah, what is that? Roshi Tevis? Levad ki mechinas helam atzmi. Torah lo mechinas. What is that word? Anyone? Come on. Yeah. It's not a word, it's a Roshi Tevis. Yigish lemamshich lo mechinas. I'm not sure, but it's referring to the klal of the Torah. Ki im mechinas helam atzmi the Ein Sof. Wow. So it's basically Torah HaKadosha, probably something of this nature. But he's basically saying something awesome right here, right? I'm sure you've heard that the Hashem finds that the wine of the sages is greater than the Torah itself, right? Basically, there's like there's a greater stringency oftentimes in the prohibitions of the Rabbanim that they put on there, in a certain sense, even greater than the Torah of Hashem himself. Like sort of a kind of an example of this, although it's a little bit different, is like the ability that the king has, a king of Israel, Melech Yisrael, he can essentially warrant a death penalty on anyone he wants to, if it like strikes his fancy, right? The king has like total control and power over anyone in the kingdom. Whereas Hashem and his Torah meted out through the Sanhedrin, etc., they can't just kill anybody for whatever they want because they feel like it. I mean, it's a crazy power the Torah gives the king, but at the end of the day, he does have that power. Like life and death is completely in his hands. So you see that in a certain sense, there was a greater koach from God granted into man than there was even in the Torah itself. There's like a certain limitations on the power of Torah versus, so in a similar sense, it's the same thing with the Rabbanim, right? The Rabbanim can make decrees. Look, we just learned previously, like the Gezerah de Rabbah. They could just say, like, you know what? We're not going to blow the shofar because whatever, we have our reasons. Someone might carry. And all of a sudden they just undo the laws of the Torah. You're not going to read the Megillah. You're not going to shake a lulav and esrog. You're not going to blow the shofar. Where did you get such a koach to just like decide that Hashem's Torah doesn't apply? Right? So we see from here, there's something, a richer and greater level of elukus. But I'm saying this because this is so counterintuitive. Most people will tell you, there's even people today in this world that like sort of specifically don't believe in it's still a remnant from our crooked past. They don't believe in the oral Torah, right? The written Torah, okay, that came from God. But the oral Torah, it's kind of it's an amalgamation of ideas, and it's merely the minds of man. It's not divine. What he's saying here is unbelievable. He's saying not only is it divine, it reaches to levels of divinity that come through the work of man, which goes to the helam ha'atzmi of Ein Sof, basically the essence of God, more than the written Torah does. And therefore the Torah Shebaal Peh is far superior in its ability to reveal godliness than the Torah itself. And this is, by us, it's sort of common knowledge, right? This is the idea of the Torah Shebaal Peh is like Bina, and the Torah Shebeksav is Chochmah. We just got through saying that when you bring something down into its pratim, you reach to a higher source, and then you have to speak it out. Torah Shebaal Peh, it's dafka spoken, it comes into a higher source. So even though it looks like the sages sort of just grabbed everything they had from the Chumash, and they were just sort of explaining it, the reality is they had to go much, much higher than the Chumash itself, the Torah Shebeksav, in order to draw their chidushim. Yes, they drew it through the Chumash. In other words, they were like, they hung it on a certain verse, right? And they're like, it comes through here. So it looks like the prat is a result of the klal. But as we've been trying to explain, the source of the prat is actually higher than the klal. It's just that it's sort of got, klalled up in basically, and then they drew it through there and say, see, it comes right from this klal. So everything they say has justification as though it's coming right from the Torah. But the reality is we didn't get that when we got the Torah. They showed us things that were beyond the Torah and sort of filtered them through the Torah and put them in our hands. Footnote 46. Yeah.
In that vein, it should follow that the oral Torah was meant to be written. Because,
Written dafka?
yeah, because isn't that when you're writing it down, you're bringing it further into cloud, further into pra?
One could argue the opposite, but I can see what you're saying. In other words, the idea of coming down into the written word is a further descent than just it being in speech.
Exactly.
On the other hand, the idea of speech is that it's sort of malleable, and that kind of makes it more prat-like because it can change, right? So that was why they didn't want to write it down, because it's specifically not this sort of. And even today we say we're not so medactic in the words. Like, in other words, it's more of the concepts that are contained. We wound up being very medactic in the words when we actually get to it, because there's also Ruach HaKodesh involved in those written words. But in theory, the idea is the perfection of the letters, and like the sealing of those letters is really just in the written Torah. Right. And the oral Torah, and you see there's sometimes different versions of the oral Torah. Like we have different girsas, and like what, each one is, it's more like the idea which is primary than the actual letters.
So the idea feels like it's going higher up into the realms of Chochmah and Bina, rather than being drawn down into like material worlds where it's actually.
I'm saying in order to get that idea to come out and speak it out, they had to go higher. I hear what you're saying, though. Yeah, Naftali.
What's the this people book, or actually people got it. Torah and Torah is essentially like a shorthanded book. The old Torah was given at the time.
A shorthand. I mean, I hear what you're saying, but again, the what we're saying now is kind of the opposite. It's not. It's not like we just had this oral Torah, and like we just sort of jotted it down in this book as a reminder. What we're saying is we actually developed the oral Torah. We made it come out of this book. Now, once we brought it out, you can find every single piece in this book, and therefore it looks like this book is merely a shorthand from what we discussed. But the reality is, all those discussions were sort of man-made in a certain sense, drawn from an even higher source than the Torah itself. But what? Because they're like true Torah ideas, and it is truly a godly mission that we were on. They can find expression, every single last detail, to the point of the Helam HaAtzmi, the Orein Sof, and the spheres of Atzilus. They're all sitting inside that Torah, but we didn't get those when we got the Torah. We had to like find them, and then they filtered themselves through the Torah to the point that they found themselves first in that klal, and then we sort of pulled them out into our Torah Sheba'al Peh. So we're definitely still holding that book. All right, let's look at footnote 46. Which we were saying that we reached the essence, which is above the klal of the Torah. And he says, "Masha amr dekol masha talmid basik asid lechadesh hakol nitan lemoshe misina." Let's relook at this statement. Everything a future student will come up with a novel idea was already given to Moshe at Sinai. Who the fishmatan Torah nitna Torah k'moshe mushreshes behelam ha'atzmi ein sof. Wow. So he basically says there was a certain one instance of the actual delivery of Hashem, of the essence of the Torah, and that was at Har Sinai. Right? So in other words, we can still say that in other words, when we bring out even the greatest of all chidushim, right? We don't say that we went past the Torah into God. That's not what we say. We say everything was given to Moshe at Har Sinai, which we were saying a second ago, that was like the klal. Let me try and present the difficulty, right? We're saying, he's trying to answer a question in this footnote that just came up. On one hand, we're saying when you are mining the details, you're actually going past the klal into the Helam HaAtzmi, the essence of God, which preceded, so to speak, the first klal of Torah. On the other hand, we have a statement which contradicts that, which says any future student is going to come up with a unique idea. It was already given to Moshe at Sinai. It doesn't say it was already in the Eibishter beyond the Torah that was given to Moshe at Sinai. You see what I'm saying? No? Raise your hand, you understand the contradiction here. No? Or we have one man in. Let me try again. Right? What we said before, let's say regarding the world, was that when you work with the pratim, you don't just go to the original klal. You don't just go to the ocean of light from which that klal came from. You go to a place which the world has never seen before, which is Helam Ha'atzmi de Ein Sof, that is only sort of first comes available when you work on yourself in the most detailed fashion of the world. Okay, so basically there was something that the world never saw that you can only see when you get to the prat. Now it looks like when it comes to the Torah, we shift this a little bit. So I'm going into all these details because we have a little bit of time to go. We might as well be ma'ayin in the pratim. Why not? That's what the whole mimer is about. When it comes to the Torah, it's slightly differently what he's saying here right now. We would think that when you're going to go looking into the details of the Torah Shabbal Peh, you're not going to just get to the Klal Rishon, right? You're going to go to something which this world has never seen, a part of the Torah which is like still by Hashem, before that which even was the original Klal that he gave, right? That's what the analogy should show you. It's just that that's not, we have a statement of the stages which disagrees with that. Because this is anything that a future student will come up with, it was already given to Moshe at Sinai, which means it did come into the world. And there was like a place where that level of what before was called the Helam Ha'atzmi of the Ein Sof, it actually came and like appeared, so that whenever you take a klal, a prat out, it was actually already given then. So he's saying there's something unique about the Torah. When Hashem gave us the Torah, there was like I guess that's why some of it was written and some of it was just spoken from Hashem, but there was this essential, that which was, there was a delivery of the Helam Ha'atzmi of the Ein Sof inside of the original Har Sinai. And it was slightly different than what we said about the world. And it makes sense, because the world is basically something Hashem is, it's not Hashem, right? It's like it's an expression of Hashem so that the world can experience Godness. The Torah is Hashem. So when he gave us the Torah, he actually gave us the whole God, including the Helam Ha'atzmi, the Ein Sof, that can never be revealed until you work it out from the pratim. It's just that it was sitting there already sort of waiting to be mined out in the end. Make sense to some, yeah? You following at least the argument? David? Lost you? Yeah. Okay. We'll try again.
Is there really a contradiction there? Because aren't we just saying in that what Moshe received, he just received it in a non-revealed way?
Yeah. He received it, but how is that different than essentially the original klal of the world, or even the ocean of Or Ein Sof light that preceded the worlds? In other words, it was already there, just in a hidden way. But when it came to the worlds, we said there was something that you can achieve through the details, which was never in a state of expression before.
Yeah. So that's exactly what we're saying, no? And then
But except the difference is Hashem actually gave us the Torah. He never until the end of days, when we'll elicit the Helam Ha'atzmi of the Ein Sof through working on ourselves, it will never have been seen such a level. Whereas what we're saying at the time of Matan Torah, that level, he put it there, he revealed it. It's just that when he revealed something that is the essence of God, which cannot be seen, and then he gave us the koach to, so to speak, reveal it through working in the details of the Torah Shabbal Peh.
Okay, but we're agreeing there's a difference in the level of revelation. The first revelation isn't really revealed, it's just that it's the cloud that contains it. I'm still not following why there's a contradiction.
You see how it's different from the situation with the worlds, or no?
The world, as in because when you're receiving, when you're going to the prat of the last world, that is actually something that was never revealed bichlal.
That's right.
But here, when you get into the prat of the Torah, you're saying that prat is contained in the initial cloud.
That's right.
But it's still contained. Not
Fine,
revealed.
but that never happened in the world. And if you're understanding bichlal? I think I came up with an answer and a solution as to why that is. But first, let's make sure everybody's on the same page. Noam, you're following. Anybody else is following here? Kind of. Okay, let's just draw one more picture of it real quick, right? It sort of requires you to have paid attention to the whole mimer, but essentially what we said was that the ocean of light that contained a little drop of light, which was the klal of all the worlds, right, is essentially attainable by working with the klal. If you're working with the worlds, you can find the ocean of light from which the world originally came from, because all that ocean was kind of hidden inside of that original cloud, and the world have access to it. You can bit yourself to there. But then we said even furthermore, if you work with the details of this world, you can reach to something which is beyond the infinite ocean of light, which no eye has ever seen, and it was even before the original ocean of light from which the original cloud was taken from. And we said that was sort of like the purpose of creation. Like only by making us so detailed and so distinct from him can we actually eventually reach to a level of the Etzem HaOr, which never showed itself until you work with these details. So the Etzem HaOr was only available because you got to the details. It was never in the cloud. It was never part of the cloud. It was something which completely beyond the cloud, and it was even beyond the ocean of light from which the cloud was taken. So, right? That much we said. Now we started saying a very similar thing when it came to the Torah. That when you work with the details of the Torah, you can reach up to the original klal. And furthermore, when you work with the real details of the Torah Shebaal Peh, you can reach up to the Helam HaAtzmi of the Ein Sof that basically was never in the first klal. Remember that? Yeah. However, now he's saying it was seemingly in the first klal when it comes to the Torah, because anything a future student will come up with was already given to Moshe at Sinai, which means even if you're going to come up with something from the Helam HaAtzmi of the Ein Sof, you're not going past the Torah. You're just going to the Torah because it was given to Moshe at Sinai. So there's a difference when it comes to the world. That level of the Helam HaAtzmi was never available. In the Torah, he actually delivered the Helam HaAtzmi in the klal of the Torah. And when we work and mining out the details, we get to it. You following this? Yeah. So to me, it seems kind of obvious. The reason why through working through the details, we can reach the Helam HaAtzmi is because Hashem made that available to us by giving it in the Torah. Right? That's what the Torah is. The Torah is not creation. The Torah is basically God's essence, and he's like, I'll give it to you in the world. Of course, it was a state of total concealment in hell. In other words, if it wasn't with the Torah, you could work on the details all day long. You would never be able to access the Helam HaAtzmi. It's because Hashem basically put the Helam HaAtzmi to us inside the Torah, so that therefore, when you work on the details, you can reach it. That's my best solution for that problem.
I mean, it's kind of like we were saying about like Rabbi Yishmael's principles, or the principles of expounding and things that come out from Moshe as well. Like it's kind of like it's like the Moshe brings the key. Like the key isn't the lock, but you can't open the door without the key. So it's like you have this. So you like the Chiddush and the stuff you learn from expounding on the Pratim is like this new. It's like opening a door that wasn't open before, but you can't do it without the key, even though the key doesn't contain the lock or the room. Does that make sense? Like,
you had me there, but no, yeah. Yeah, I get what you're saying. All right, let's finish it up because we're gonna over lengthen ourselves. So this is what he says. There's a statement that we teach to the children. One of the original 12 pasukim you're supposed to teach to the children. It says Yegatu Matzati, which means if someone says I toiled but I didn't find, don't believe them. If someone says I didn't toil and I found, don't believe them. But if someone says I toiled and I found, believe them. This is one of the 12 pasukim, right? That we teach to the young children. The Indian matzia. So what does it mean? Yegati umatzati. I toiled and I found. The Indian of a matzia, we've discussed this in several classes before. What's a matzia? A find, right? Something that you were not planning on finding. It's like, oh, these houses are all $10 million on this street. I found one for $1 million. It's a matzia, right? Speaking to the real estate guys in the class. So he says, this is the Indian of matzia. Matzasi, hu shemotzi davar chadash v'techila lo haya efshar l'sha'er. Yet a matzia is that you find something brand new that you could never even really have imagined or calculated would be there. Right? You can't calculate it. A matzia is like, well, it's not on the market. It's completely, I would never have calculated such a thing. Kamo matzia sheba behesech hadas. Like a matzia, which comes only with what's called hesech hadas, which means total unawareness, right? You couldn't plan and calculate this. It comes without your intention. V'zeu yagati umatzati. And that's what it means when we say, I toiled and I matzati, I found. When you will toil in Torah. And it's actually, by the way, this is not for tzaddikim and special people. This is for you guys. It's so true that the only thing that's difficult is to toil in Torah. And I'm not talking about toiling in Torah over your Gemara in your Chavrusa. I'm talking about taking some piece of information or some question and walking around a tree for 8 hours and trying to figure out the depths. I mean, looking in Sfarim and figuring out, but like mamish probing inside of yourself in the deepest way possible through the elements of the Torah and through everything you know about Torah up until now, and like mamish stressing yourself out to find a chiddush. Everyone, not only can you do this, it's a mitzvah for you to do this. So when this takes place, yagati umatzati, through the Yagia in Torah, you find and reveal new things. Can you imagine that? Inside of your little head, no one's walking in the forest around the tree 8 hours, and mamash, God revealed something in his Torah that no one in the world's ever seen before. Not the Arizal and not Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Yes, you can find a Chiddush in Torah through Yagia. No one saw it before. Point to it in the Zohar. I didn't see it there. Ubefrat Pnimiyas HaTorah. He says specifically you should do this in Pnimiyas HaTorah, which is like the Torah of Mashiach. So in other words, if you put this effort on in Yanim of Chassidus, it's like you're finding from the Helama Atzmi, like we spoke about in the afternoon class, like things that only a prophet would know. But Baruch Hashem, he made these things available to you. You're swimming around in prophetic business, and you can come in with Chidushim over there. And by the way, not only can you, not only must you, this is what you have to do in order to reveal the Torah of Mashiach. It comes, like we're saying, but Mashiach is going to come from heaven and give it to us. Not according to everything we said. It has to come through man. When you arrive at it through your own toiling, it comes from a much, much deeper place than anything that was delivered to you. Sheba behesech hadas. And Mashiach, by the way, it says, comes behesech hadas, right? There's a famous story which I always think of when this happens, that two Chassidim were sitting around 770, sort of just like for bringing, and all of a sudden, like they look up at the Lubavitcher Rebbe standing over them. And they like freaked out. They went pale in the face and almost like fainted. And the Rebbe said, just like that, Mashiach's going to come. Which means behesech hadas. You weren't expecting it. It's not like you're counting down, 10, 9, 8. It comes out of nowhere. So he said, this is called also a chiddush, a mitzvah, right? Something which is just like suddenly found through your toil. And that's what happens. If you ever really meditated deeply on an idea, what happens is you're like, oh, right? You find something that you didn't know was there before. After like struggling and stirring the pot 100 million times, an idea falls into your head and it clicks. You're like, oh my gosh, that puts all the points together. I found something, right? It's a mitzvah. And it's also like Mashiach, which comes behesech hadas. You weren't really planning on it. It just sort of shows up through your toil. And that's why it says, right, Mashiach himself, Matzasi David Avdi. I found David, my servant. Matzasi Dafka. It's a find. And this will be the revelation of the essence himself without a garment, right? Not even with a garment of light. The etzem ha'or, the actual essence of Hashem. To the point that what we saw on Har Sinai is only a tiny ray. Can you imagine the Jewish people? They saw this, they all died. They flew out of their bodies. They flew back miles and miles from. It's only a small example of what the revelation we're going to soon see. B'ezrat Hashem b'bias Mashiach tzidkenu b'karov mamish. Chazak u'baruch. Takes a special skill to turn 5